study some Latin, then I've got to go to work, then I've got to go and do the shopping, etc., etc. Now, from these, you will then create little branches. So, for example, when you go and do the shopping, which let's just say is this one here, then you can then do little subcategories. What am I going to buy? And I'm going to go to the supermarket, I've got to go to the post office, I've got to go to the bank. So that's 3 subsections. And then from those, you can then have further subsections. Free mind. Yeah, Tim's made a very good point there. Free mind is a great, there's lots of great software out there. You know, I was going to include some links about mind maps, but you know, you just have to put mind maps or mind mapping into Google, anything at all, and you'll find lots and lots of things. Don't be sorry, Tim, if you are apologizing, there's no need to. I'm glad you wrote that. Free mind, I know a free mind, and it's a very, very good example. So that, you know, that's what mind mapping is. It really is, when you think about it, it's almost similar to what we were saying about categories. You categorize things and write them down that way rather than just a list, because a list isn't meaningful. Now, to create the best mind map, you want to take some time over it and do something similar that they've done here. Try and create colors, pictures, draw a little picture. You know, if you're going to draw some, if you're going to do a branch on doing some shopping, you know, draw a little silly picture on, I don't know, a saucepan or something, or a piece of bread. It might seem silly, but it will help you remember it. It will help you remember that you did that. You know, you'll see all these branches here, they're different colors. They're not there just to be pretty. They actually make a point that it helps you remember because you're using more senses. And again, in memory, if you can use as many senses as you can, even visualize all your senses, that'll help you remember rather than just blankly trying to remember something. We're told to color code them as well as memory can find it easier if it can relate to a color, Arki said. Yes, exactly. That's because it's to do with your visual sense. So it's including something other than you just trying to remember it. If you can, for example, I was saying there about food, and you draw a little piece of bread, if you can then try and imagine what the bread smells like, all these things, again, it may seem silly compared to just writing down a shopping list, but at the end of the day, it will certainly help you remember the what it is you're trying to do a lot quicker than just a blank piece of paper with a list on it. Okay, flashbulb memory. Has anybody not heard of flashbulb memory before? Koichi, hit me with your question. Oh, okay, no need to be sorry. Okay, flashbulb memory is the memory that's given to something that happens that's very significant in our lives. We don't get many things that are significant here, and I've got here pictures of JFK, Diana, the Princess of Wales, and of course 9/11. Depending on our age and the relevance these things are to us, we will remember. If we just take probably the most recent event, 9/11, we can probably remember where we were when 9/11 happened, when we realized what was going on, when we realized the enormity of the situation. And studies have shown that this memory, that you remember when you were when JFK was shot, when Diana was killed, and when the planes hit the Twin Towers, those things that you remember on those days are highly accurate. They are unbelievably accurate. I remember where I was at work, I was in the office, it was lunchtime for us, and I remember what I was wearing, I remember what the people around me were wearing, what I'd just eaten. I remembered everything, and that memory is really, really accurate. It's extraordinarily accurate. Now, consequently, it's a natural phenomenon. So, for example, let me give you another example. Yes, exactly, Monique. Exactly. Now, let me give you an example. Just a silly example. If you walk in a field and there are some cows there grazing away, you know, there's nothing there that's going to grab your memory. You're going to say, you know what, I had a lovely day in the field. Fantastic. So what? If a bull comes at you at, you know, 50 miles an hour and you think, oh my God, am I going to meet my maker? You're going to remember that day probably more than you would have done otherwise. Again, that's something quite significant, and it's related to your mortality almost. So Patrick is a bull. That's fantastic. So now this this concept of flashbulb memory and its accuracy is important in memory techniques. If we can recreate, obviously nothing stressful, we're not talking about that. Thank you, Patrick. I won't fear the bulls. If we can recreate this sense of strangeness, of weirdness, of shock almost, that's bound to help us in our memory, isn't it? I mean, is it not? Because it tells us that flashbulb memory is more accurate than any other memory. So if we can recreate that, and I'll show you how to do that, that's going to help us in our list of remembering things or anything like that. Abdul, glad you joined us. Fantastic. Okay, so from any questions on flashbulb memory? If you can quickly raise your hands, then I'll. Thank you, Anshu. Yes, it's really easy, Koichi. If we can train ourselves to do it, it's really easy. Okay, here now is an example of normal memory, and it will give us an idea of what the police have to deal with every day. I'm going to read this out for those that haven't that aren't able to see it or anything. Okay, this is a psychological study and made by psychologists, and it's a robust study, which means that no matter how many times you recreate this with different participants, as long as you follow the same design of the study, the results will always be the same, and that's how things get into print. When you can replicate them, then you've got something. You've got a concept. So let's have a look at normal memory. So Loftus and Palmer in the 70s, they showed video clips of car accidents to 45 participants, who were then asked to describe what had happened and were posed a number of specific questions. Okay, now critically, some of the questions, or one of the questions was, how fast were the cars going when they hit each other? That was the question. How fast were the cars going when they hit each other? Now, some people were asked that question. Others were asked the same question, but instead of the verb hit, that verb was replaced by some other words, such as smashed, collided, bumped, or contacted. And you can see, looking at those words, that they range in their spectrum of violence almost. Now, the responses to how fast the cars were going varied depending on what verb was used. And you can see that, and this was robust. It happens every single time, no matter how many times you do it. There is the average, the distance between the average speed given will be quite remarkable. So when the verb contacted, which is a very nice soft contact, you know, there's no violence there. When that was used, the average speed that the participants gave, they said it was about 31.8 miles an hour. That was their average that the participants used. And you can see going up, smashed being the most violent word. When that verb was used, participants on average said it was almost 10 miles. The average speed they thought was 10 miles an hour. So, you know, so much for their memory. And you can see how easily influenced it could be. It's quite remarkable. And if you can imagine being the police and you've got to try and get witnesses and try and gather what happened, you've got a lot of work to do there. You know, you can argue that it's something to do with flashbulb memory. You know, why not ask that? You know, is it every day you see a car crash? Well, you know, is it the same? You know, I don't think it is, because, you know, we see on the media every day. We see things like, you know, we hear about muggings, we hear about accidents. It's on the radio. So, you know, we're almost desensitized to it. So yes, it is a shock if we were to witness a real car accident. but I don't think it's on the same level as 9/11. You know, we don't, that isn't in our daily lives. We don't hear about those things every day. So that's what's quite